Hello, everybody. How's it going? Hi. So, just for a couple of housekeeping things, please make sure that you have your microphone muted if possible. And luckily, I have some of the controls here. You can see we have a bunch of different laptops today because we have so many cool things to show you guys. By the way, my name is Chrissy Rubel, and I am an environmental program specialist with the Watershed Stewardship Program with Cobb Water.
And I'm Mike Hale. I'm Cobb Water's watershed supervisor. We work together.
Yes, we work a lot together. Now, one of the things that we wanted to come up with for a lunch and learn topic is a question that we get very often, especially in Adopt a Stream. So can you tell them a little bit about what Adopt a Stream is?
Yeah, Adopt a Stream is it's a state program run by Environmental Protection Division, and we are coordinators for that program here within Cobb County, and it's basically the state's volunteer water quality monitoring program. So we provide training and tools for our residents to monitor streams, and we'll get into what those monitoring details are throughout the program here today over the next 45 minutes or so. So if you're interested in that, at the end we'll have a lot more information specifically about Adopt a Stream, but there's always georgiaadoptastream.org online that you can check out as well.
So how today's going to work, kind of like how you were saying, we're going to figure out ways you can determine the health of your stream through the lens of Adopt a Stream and what they do. And I'm going to give you guys a general overview about what streams are, and especially streams in Cobb County, and what different streams can look like, because not all streams are the same. And to begin with that, let's dive right into, now you can see me up in this top corner here. And I just wanted to talk a little bit and give us a moment of peace. I know we're all in, maybe some of us are in our homes on the go, but I want us to all look at the stream and kind of engage our senses in it. Maybe take a deep breath and hear that sound of rushing water, right? And a stream is a continuous body of surface water that flows within the stream bed and its channels. And within Cobb County alone, we have a total of 3,200 miles of streams. So if we were to lay all those streams end to end, it would be almost 3,200 miles long. That is very long. So chances are you really do live near a stream in Cobb County. And the thing is, all of our streams and all of us depend on the land around it, especially what we call watersheds. So a watershed is an area of land where water drains to a specific point. And we all live in watersheds. So whenever it rains, whether it absorbs through those pervious surfaces like the dirt, or whether it runs off that concrete or asphalt on the road, somehow all of that water drains through either stormwater infrastructure or through the ground and ends up in the lowest part of that landscape, where there is typically a river, lake, or a stream. Now, within Cobb County alone, we have two major watersheds that are defined by the highest points in the county. So the borders of watersheds are, okay, if we can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Great, thank you. So watersheds are typically defined by borders, and those borders are the high points in a landscape. So the two major watersheds in Cobb County are defined by Kennesaw Mountain, Sweat Mountain, Blackjack Mountain, Lost Mountain, and the two different watersheds are named after the major bodies of water within them. So for example, Mike and I are sitting in the Chattahoochee River watershed. We're in Marietta. For those of you who live more in the Kennesaw area, you would be in the Etowah River watershed. And within those two major watersheds, we have even more watersheds that are named after the streams that are nearby. So not only are we in the Chattahoochee watershed, we are also in the Roddenwood Creek watershed within it. Now, with all of talking about water and everything, it's kind of making me thirsty. And I'm going to put a question to you guys, and go ahead and open up your chat box and see if you'll know the answer. Where do we get our local drinking water? What sources do we get our drinking water from? We have two major sources in Cobb County. One is a river and one is a lake. So go ahead and type that in the chat box and see if anybody can guess correctly. So I did mention one just now. So let's see. Oh, we already got a response from Nancy, Anita, and Cheryl saying the Chattahoochee River. And Anita also mentioned Allatoona Lake. Yes, you are absolutely correct. Oh, yes. And Derek even mentions the Etowah River as well. But we mainly have other people use the Etowah River for their drinking water in different counties. But within Cobb County specifically, we use the Chattahoochee River and Allatoona Lake. And we have two drinking water treatment plants that take the water from those areas and they clean it all nice and send it through their drinking water distribution system to our tap. Now, when it comes to who relies on a healthy stream, well, we do. It's super important that we keep the Chattahoochee River and Lake Allatoona as clean as possible because it's where we get our drinking water from. But it's not just us that depend on these major sources of water. There are also animals that really depend on these major sources of water as their habitat. And oh, I wish that this video would load so you can see how cute this little frog is. But alas, the internet is the internet, right? In fact, a lot of major diverse food chains begin in the water itself. A lot of insects have their life cycle begin in the water. And when they grow to fully fledged, for example, mayflies, they begin a really special diverse food chain, whether it be they're eaten by fish, and then that fish is eaten by a red-shouldered hawk. So keeping these streams as healthy as possible is not just important for us, but to also continue this energy that moves through the ecosystem. Now, with all of those in mind, we also use water in a direct way, right? We use it in a direct way, we drink it, but we also use water in an indirect way. And it's still important to have our streams healthy in an indirect way because some of that water is used to grow our food, right? So we're consuming water in an indirect way when we eat a piece of broccoli. But water doesn't just grow food, it can help in the production of almost everything that's around you, right? So this graphic might be hard to see for some of you. It's a little blurry for me, but this is a great infographic from the Sierra Club if you wanted to look it up. And it shows the water footprint of all the different items that can be around you. So for example, at the bottom, his to-go latte, some of you might have had a latte this morning. It takes almost 53 gallons of water alone to make a single latte. So all of us are depending on streams in different ways, whether we be animals hungry for a little mayfly or us hungry for our morning latte. Thirsty latte. So how do we know if a stream is healthy? And the thing about knowing if streams are healthy, we don't have a thing where streams look all the same. Streams are very different depending on where they're at and what watershed they're in, the land around them. But in order for us to understand what makes a stream healthy, let's look at the basics of how streams are made, right? Or how streams, what makes up a stream. So what makes a stream? Let's begin with the land around it. I began talking a little bit about the watershed, but we're talking about the direct land next to the stream, right? We call that area a stream buffer or a riparian zone. And beyond the riparian zone is the floodplain for when we get all of that heavy rain and the water may flow over the banks and off to the side. Now, these zones can look different from different places. And remember, guys, feel free to chime in on the chat box saying, hey, my stream bank kind of looks like this. We really want to know. We really want to give you guys the opportunity to share your streams with us as well. But stream buffers or riparian zones can look different from stream to stream. They can have maybe a lot of vegetation, especially a lot of good tree canopy. But there are also some streams where they don't really have much of a buffer. It's grass all the way up to the bank. Now, speaking of banks, focusing on the banks of the stream, which is the land that is directly next to the water. banks of streams can look very different from place to place, especially if they're in the middle of nature where there's a lot of woods and stream buffer. But sometimes streams can be so powerful and charge through their channel and cause the sides of the banks to kind of be scoured, causing erosion where you can see those roots from different trees and that nice Georgia red clay. The stream channel, as I was mentioning, is the physical barrier in which the water flows. And stream channels can vary in different ways as well. And while I don't have a fancy picture of each of these, you'll kind of get the idea. There are some streams that kind of have that sinuous curve going along. And then there are some streams that can be more on the straight side, or even some that are altered by humans to be straight for the sake of maybe some infrastructure around it. So depending on your stream channel, you can have it kind of wavy or some straight portions here and there. Now, what's an interesting thing with Georgia specifically when it comes to trying to categorize our streams, one thing that we can kind of assign a sort of name to is the stream floor or the substrate. So stream floors in Georgia, typically we have two categories. They can kind of overlap. They can kind of be added with something. We typically have what we call a rocky bottom stream, where, believe it or not, there's rocks. Or we have a muddy bottom stream, where you can have mud and maybe some sand and sediment, the like. But one of the most important things about streams, especially what Mike's going to get into in a moment, is the sun and the shade. So maybe you have a great tree canopy over your stream and it's causing a lot of great shade, or maybe there's not many trees in your area and the sun's directly shining on it. Either way, the sun and the shade play a very key role in the health of your stream, especially its ecosystem. So maybe the sun's shining on there and encouraging plants to grow within the water, but shade is also very critical because it regulates the temperature of that water, making sure our aquatic friends are nice and comfortable. Now, the most important thing, of course, in a stream is water, right? And depending on your stream, the water can actually vary. Maybe your stream is kind of more of what we call an ephemeral stream, where it only really fills up when it's raining. Maybe you have a consistent stream throughout the whole year, or it changes with the seasons. It all depends on where your stream is in its watershed, if it's close to a lot of infrastructure, if it's in the middle of nature. There are so many different factors, but at least all streams have these things in common, all those components of a bank, riparian zone. Oh, Jim, awesome. We just got that question. We will keep that in mind. We will have time to read all the questions in the chat box. So if you guys have questions like Jim, go ahead and type it in there and we'll address it. No worries. So when it comes to understanding the health of our streams and everything, and when we say health, we mean, is it able to support wildlife? And is it able to still be a good water source that can provide potable drinking water, right? When it comes to that specific health of the stream, more than just the factors that I just showed you play a huge role. And that is what Mike is going to get into. So I'm going to flip the screen. Here we go. And here is Mike. And I'll click it for you because that's kind of touchy.
That's okay. Hello, hello.
Oh, yeah, click this one.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the different parameters and things to look for to determine if your stream is healthy through your neighborhood. And this applies loosely to most waterways. So as we go through, and again, feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll look at the stream continuum concept, and that is really a concept that came about a number of years ago, that if you're going to assess the health of the stream and the water and the habitat quality and all the factors about a river or a stream, you don't look at just one little spot. So for example, if you have a stream going through your property, you really need to look far beyond upstream and downstream of your property to determine what is going to affect that. So a lot of times we get people saying, they call and say, oh, I have some erosion. I want to put in some kind of stability infrastructure or something to help that. What that will do is change the stream dynamics up and downstream from that. So there's really, it's important to think of it as one long system rather than just a little spot within your property or on the stream. So the basic measures we'll look at this afternoon are the visual observations. We'll look at chemical measurements, bacterial measurements, a little bit of geomorphology, and some biological assessments that you can help kind of figure out if the stream is healthy. So of course, if the biological community is there, within the water, that's a really good indication. So a lot of this, think of it as more common sense type looking at it. So the visual observations, we look at color, we look at the surface. Is there anything on the surface? Of course, is there an odor, or if there's not an odor, is it natural, and water clarity. So you can see in the upper right, a gentleman holding a bag. When we look at water color, if we looked at the stream behind him, it would just, it would appear orange, and we think, okay, this stream is orange, which might indicate sediment or something else flowing through it. But when you have it in a little jar or a bag like that, you can see through it, and that really gives you the color of the water. If it was green, that might indicate algae, so it's some kind of nutrient causing an algal bloom. If it was orange or red, probably Georgia clay. If it was white, maybe it was, sewage spills often tend to be white. Sometimes people wash paintbrushes outside. That can turn the stream white if it's white paint. Sometimes, other materials that are white do get washed in there, whatever that might be. The lower left, we look at the surface of the stream. So if it's coated in pollen or leaves, in this case, there's a little sheen of oil, and it's used motor oil and gasoline. And that was from somebody cleaning out their filters in their car on the street and washed it into the storm drain. And this little section is about a quarter mile downstream from where that was occurring. So it does get into the stream in the storm drain. And one of the questions that I think is that Jim had about DOT and the stormwater infrastructure as far as using storm drains. The storm drains along the roadways are there to prevent flooding on the roadway and causing, hazards related to floods and cars and automobiles, things like that. It used to be that in a lot of areas, the stormwater was combined with the sewer water, and it was sent to the treatment plant to be cleaned. Every time it rained, or when it would rain heavy, that combined sewer overflow system would inundate the treatment facilities, and they would spill, causing even more damage and more sewage getting into the environment. So Cobb County has a separate storm sewer system, and it's permitted for that one. So the reason for the storm drains flowing into the stream, that's just the nearest way to go. If the infrastructure didn't provide for that type of flooding prevention, our basements, our houses, our buildings, things like that would get flooded, our roadways would stop. So that's kind of the easiest, cheapest way to get there. There could be better technologies, but it's what we've got going on right now. And the other photo in the lower right corner has two streams confluencing together, joining together. You can see the stream coming in from the right is a little bit more turbid, or it's kind of murky, and it was raining. I think that's a Allatoona Creek, and it was raining up in the side where it was on the white. It wasn't raining on the area of the left in the watershed. You can see that rainwater was washing in, causing a difference. So what Chrissy was talking about, the watershed and the impacts that the way the land is, that really has a big impact on our stream waterway. And of course, the photo in the upper left is actually of a sewer spill. There's some algae growing that kind of has a gray algae filamentous, and this is I think it was about a half mile downstream from where that sewer was overflowing. And one of our volunteers who does the monitoring found that and reported it, and it was able to get corrected and stopped and continue on going. So those visual observations are really important when you're making an assessment. Just, especially if you want to go in, a lot of people want to take their dogs into the stream or go and play in the stream or just peck around and see, explore. These are some things you might look for before you get into the water. And of course, all these have originated not in the water itself, but on the land and the watershed around it. And the riparian and the stream buffers would help cushion that water from flowing in, trap the sediment. It would trap, it is an incredible natural filter for these systems. Another observation we have, this orange, you might have seen this. If you do poke around streams, you probably have seen this at some point, and it's more prevalent at different times of year. This is iron fixing bacteria, and it's a bacteria that in its metabolism process, it basically takes iron in the soil and it creates this byproduct, this orange fluffy stuff. It's not always present there, the orange flocculent that sticks to the bottom. And sometimes it also, in the lower left of the picture, you can see that there's an oil looking sheen. That's also a byproduct of that iron bacteria. And it looks like there's gasoline in the water. Sometimes they're together, sometimes it's one or the other. It just depends. Temperature, season, there's a lot of variables that happen with this. But one way to tell if you do see this, and if you're curious if it's a petroleum product or the iron fixing bacteria, which is natural, so it's not really an issue. It might not look pretty, but it's there and it's just part of the natural system. If you're curious if it's a bacteria or petroleum, you can take a little stick and poke the surface where that sheen is. And if it shatters like glass and kind of comes back together jagged, it's most likely that iron bacteria. And if it comes back together, kind of globs together, sort of, I would think of a lava lamp. That's one, that might indicate that it's petroleum. This is one question that we get a lot. And it doesn't mean that the habitat of the stream is unhealthy. Another measurement we have is pH. pH generally stays around 6.75 or 7.0 in our area, typical for our streams. When it does stray, that's a good indication that maybe something is being washed in or put in or dumped into the water. The pH scale, most life is adapted to live between 6 and 8.5. There are some streams in South Georgia that get down to 3.5, and those tannic waters, those kind of backwaters, swamps and places like that, and that's normal for down there. But around here in Cobb County, typically we have usually about 6.75 is the average. And the thing about pH scale, it's logarithmic, so a 6 is 10 times more acidic than a 7. And then a 5, of course, is 100 times more acidic than a 7. So it really, small movements along that scale make a big difference. And we always use the example of, when you get soap in your eye, that burns. Think about the critters in there. So that would be a base. And then if you get lemon in a cut, that burns. So you can see where both of those fall on the pH scale here. Lemon right about a 3. So is that 2? My eyes are bad. Maybe I need to wash them. All right, that's the last bad joke I'll tell. Probably not. Let's try and get this next slide going here. Thank you, Chrissy. Another measurement is conductivity. Conductivity is a really neat little tool. There are these little probes. They're available. They're about $80. But if you're a volunteer and do some water quality monitoring, we'll provide those in the kit. They indicate if ions are dissolved in the water. So things like salts, fertilizers, other chemicals, nitrates, things like that. It'll tell you the presence or absence there. And there are different standards for what our streams should be. The base conductivity really starts with the geology of the area. So if we have in our area mostly metamorphic, really hard bedrock type geology here, those minerals are pretty solid and stable, and they're not going to dissolve readily in water. Or if we had more of a limestone or karst type geology here, like they do in South Georgia or Northwest Georgia, those minerals will dissolve in the water, and that will pick up in the conductivity. So we kind of know what should be normal for that, and it really just is a tool. You can pop it in the water; it'll give you a number, and that the lower the number, typically the better. And it just tells you if something is in the water dissolved or not. Doesn't tell you what it is, but it's a good thing, because if there is something in the water, after, for example, after it rains, or after we have an ice storm or snow, they salt the roads, and that helps again keep our driving safe and melts the ice on the road. But when that thaws and melts down, goes down the storm drain, and then we get that salt and those materials into our stream water, and our levels of conductivity will raise up. Upper left is a sewer overflow, and actually that's the sewer that we saw the picture earlier of, that kind of grayish substrate, that algae growing. That was the manhole that was overflowing, and that usually occurs because of human actions in our homes, in our kitchen. So when we put fats and oils and grease and rags and those whites that they say are flushable that end up getting caught in the drain, those all cause backups, and you can, it'll cause an overflow and a spill. And typically these sewer lines are along our waterways because they are conveyed by gravity, so it's mostly gravity flow. And that was January 2nd, I think, a couple of years ago. It was a really cold day, and there was steam coming up, and it was looking like Yellowstone. It was beautiful. It was pretty nasty.
Yeah.
So, and agricultural runoff is another thing too. We don't have a whole lot of agriculture in our area in Cobb so much anymore as we used to, but in those areas that do, we talked about the Etowah River and Chattahoochee. Certainly, there's agriculture along those waterways. So that's where the stream buffer would really come in play, of having that area, the riparian area, to slow down that water and trap a lot of that sediment and things coming in. So livestock is another one. Pet waste can cause conductivity to raise when you don't pick up after our pet, and that rain washes that pet waste into the stream. It'll happen, and those of us who have chickens need to be careful that our chicken coop's not too close to the stream. So. Dissolved oxygen is really one that indicates everything. It's not one that you can just see. You'd have to do a little titration to measure it, or get a probe. There's measurements, but it's affected by temperature. So the colder the temperatures, the more oxygen that water can hold, or dissolved oxygen. And so if you can see on this little chart here, the colder months, there's a spike and a peak. Oxygen levels are higher. So in the winter and then the summer, they just naturally decline and get lower because it gets warmer out. That's true also throughout the day if the temperature fluctuates. Things that affect the oxygen levels are photosynthesis, turbulence in the water, and temperature. Those are the big ones. And of course, our friends that live in the stream, all the amphibians, the insects, the other invertebrates, the crustaceans, the fish, anything that's using their gills to capture that dissolved oxygen in the water for respiration can have an impact by those changes. So we have kind of a normal fluctuation of dissolved oxygen. So our volunteers will monitor for that as well. And measuring it, again, looking at some of these things that require it. We'll have... Oh, I'm missing a picture there. So yeah, crayfish. And some are more tolerant to oxygen levels fluctuating. Some of them are very sensitive, and when the oxygen level slips down just a little bit, they can't handle it. You hear about trout streams. Trout don't like, they can't survive naturally and continue on a life cycle year after year in waters that don't stay really cold because of that oxygen level. So we have trout streams have different restrictions on and how much riparian is necessary around those to protect that animal. And same thing with dragonflies, they're a little bit more sensitive than, say, mosquitoes. So if we have oxygen levels crashing because of pollutants, we might have more mosquitoes around, and dragonflies are predators on mosquitoes. So, there's a balance. And you can insert any organism around, get in that food chain and that food web, that energy transfer, and see how it all affects each other. Another measurement is for E. coli. And we'll get into some of the visuals more. So, how to walk up to the side of a stream, but all these kind of play together, play a big role. E. coli, of course, comes from the intestines of warm-blooded animals. So mammals and birds are populated area around here that we have. So when you feed ducks at the park, and they tend to hang out in those duck ponds at the park, sort of look pretty nasty, not something you'd want to swim in. And then pet waste. Let's see what's our next slide. So we have pet waste is a big thing. You hear about that a lot now. There's a huge push. When I was little, you just walk your dog and your dog went. And thought, okay, nobody really thought about it. Now people, I think, are tired of stepping in it. So there's a courtesy. But not only that, when it rains, it's going to dissolve up that pet waste and wash it down through the stream. So remember, it's part of the watershed. And that little white dog there, I don't think it can. I think it's enjoying watching the humans pick up after.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Scoop pick up after your pet. There's lots of, and we have resources too on that one. Another source of E. coli are, again, the sewer overflows. These manholes, these access points to the sewer is where that's going to back out. And most of them are caused by fats, oils, and grease, are clogs. Sometimes they're clogged by gravel and things getting into the lines.
And wipes.
Yeah, and wipes, flushable wipes and hygiene products, anything flushed down the toilet, toys sometimes. A few years ago, they found a ring. It didn't cause us, well, actually it was caught up in a sewer overflow. Somebody's class ring from the, I want to say it was, anyway.
Did they want their ring back after it was through the sewer system?
I don't remember, but it was it made the news anyway. So
Yeah.
all the things you can find in sewers. But yeah, most of it is come from things that we put into the system that end up clogging and blocking those. Also, roots get in there. And sometimes there's a break, there's a shift in land, or somebody's digging and it causes a break. I'm having trouble turning it. It wants to be stuck on this slide.
It really wants to remind people not to flush wipes.
So this seems like, so erosion and stormwater runoff. Now keep in mind, all these things I'm talking about are things that affect the stream. So when you want to walk down to your stream and think it's healthy, all these combined are what's going to help you figure out that picture. Because as Chrissy was saying, no two streams are alike, no two sections on a single stream are alike. Even the water flowing through, if you stand in, grab a cup of water that's flowing by, a minute later, that's different water. There could be something else in it or something that's not in it. It's just a different, it's really dynamic. It's really neat to see that. And if you do go down to your stream a lot, you'll see changes throughout the year, which is one of the nice things about doing the monitoring, is you see changes throughout the year. And it's incredible how much, how varied and diverse, and what visits and what lives there and what doesn't. But in these photos, you can see the runoff just from properties going down those storm drains. It would be nice. There are ideas of having a filter there, but there's so many storm drains, it would be impossible to go out and clean them all. So these catch basins they're deep down, water goes into them, and things can have time to settle out within that storm drain. On most of them, sometimes they're just culverts and pipe that direct the water straight off. But for the most part, they can capture, and they do get backed up. And as a resident in the community, if you see that happening, you can make some phone calls. You can call the water system, the watershed office, and we'll help figure out what's going on and try and get it. Now, that's a big opening up to something pretty massive there, but that's what we're here for. We can try and resolve it. In the upper left, you can see that's just bare land being washed down, and that's going to fill up that stream with sediment. Sedimentation is one of the biggest problems, part of this. So the non-point source pollution issues, the ones pollution that come bits from bits all around the landscape, can't really find a true source of it. Has a big impact. The geomorphology, when you look at the stream, does it have those nice riparian buffers? Are the riparian areas, the hedges that are loaded with plants and trees, helping shade, keep that temperature consistent throughout the day for those organisms that live in the water? Are the banks stable, or are they unstable and looking something like this, where you can see it's falling in, causing sedimentation? So looking at the difference here, you can see the nice rocks. Those are good shelter, good habitat places for lots of different organisms. There's, it's not just The three kind of main habitat types within the stream itself are riffles, where the water is churning. You can see that little water, kind of a waterfall, not really, but it's churning there. That's adding oxygen to the water, kind of like in a fish tank when you add a little aerator, a little bubbler. There's the pool, the deeper, slower areas. There are organisms that are best adapted to live in those. Bluegill and crayfish, things like that, really like those areas. And then there's the run, which is the area kind of between those, where the water's flowing like a river. So those are some areas. You can see in this degraded habitat, we mostly have, there's a big pool there, maybe some run, very few riffles. The rocks are covered up with sand. A lot of that sand comes in. You can see they're trying to do they added some riprap or some rocks that came down. The reason why this happens most often is you can see the parking lot behind there. When it rains, all that water is coming off of the impervious surface that doesn't allow water to soak into the ground, and it just shoots into this waterways. Again, over 3,200 miles of waterway. Trying to manage all that is just impossible. So it really puts it on us as residents here to do our part. But if that parking lot had a rain garden or a better buffer, it probably wouldn't look so much like this. Now, most of the water in this picture that's causing the damage to the stream bank probably is coming from upstream, but you can see it just goes through. It rains, that water level raises, it just shoots through so fast. The volume and velocity is too much for these unstable stream banks to handle, and it fails. Trees fall, fills in habitat. So that all is preventable and by means of having better riparian zones and stream buffers. Can't emphasize how important stream buffers are. Legally, they have to be 50 feet. There's variances. The state requires 25. Trout streams are 100. But the experts, who do this, there's the Stroud up in Pennsylvania, and they're saying 100 feet minimum to help keep the stream stabilized is the best way to go. So another one's biological aspects. You can go in the stream, pick up rocks and the woody debris and put them back carefully, but as you pick them up, you look for these little critters down here, the larval and nymph stages of different things. There's mayflies, caddisflies, there's a scud. Dragonflies, before they're out flying around, their life cycle, that top row in the middle, the one that looks like kind of like a cockroach, that's a baby dragonfly, and they're in there. They have an important role in the water. They're predators in the water, and they're predators once they're adults flying around. So lots of neat little ones to look. And of course, the other fauna that we have that rely on streams. I should have put a picture of a person in here. It's definitely, we're involved. We're part of that too. So you add it all together, it's jumping on its own. You have the visual, chemical, bacteria, the structural aspect, and the biological aspects, and all those together, you can kind of help determine the stream. We do have the Adopt a Stream program that I feel like it was a commercial for Adopt a Stream. It didn't start out that way, but it just naturally falls that way. I mean, to learn about it, we do have workshops for free. Our next chemical workshop is on April 22nd. We're doing that one for Earth Day. It's a Friday night at the Water Lab in Marietta, and we do workshops every month. We alternate between chemical monitoring and bacteria monitoring monthly, and then usually in the winter time, it's best to do the macroinvertebrates, and we do the visual monitoring, kind of get stream profile and water flow and substrate, all that good stuff. I think that's the last slide we have.
Yeah, so we'll go back to
Are there questions?
Yes, there are questions. So Jim's just wanting a little bit more clarification on how when it comes to impervious surfaces and, talking about what can we do to try to encourage others to think more about their stormwater infrastructure. But you can read. But are there, as Mike's reading Jim's question, if you have any other questions, I can answer them, just making sure that we want to include everybody if possible. But with all of this in mind, Feel free to always come and reach out to us if you have any questions about your stream. You can email us at water_RSVP@cobbcounty.org, and I'm going to type that in the chat box. water_RSVP@cobbcounty.org. And if you're ever curious about how you can get involved more, you can email us and we'll connect you with some great resources that we have, and also show you maybe some other programs that we partner with that you can get involved in as well. Especially if you have those concerns when it comes to anything that might be a strange odor or something, please let us know right away, because we want to get our dispatch center out there and ready to go.
Yes. So Jim, I'm reading through your questions. It's quite lengthy. I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline. I assure you, I'm not picking on pet owner. I'm a pet owner. I own chickens. I have a small agricultural spot in my backyard, so I'm definitely not picking on anybody, but we all do play a role. And generally in Cobb County, these are the questions that we get. And you're certainly the roadway infrastructure and parking lots, all that impervious surface. Yeah, it comes down to funding. I think is the big thing, and cost and imposing development rights and things like that. But yeah, I'm happy to have this offline with you. If you want to reach out, you have the water RSVP email. You can send me your contact information, and I can get back to you, as soon as I can.
Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to come to our presentation today, and then we can be able to connect and help you answer some of those questions. Definitely.
Were there any other questions in here?
I'm not seeing any. So feel free, if you can, go ahead and type it in real quick. We are at time, but if you have a question, feel free to type it in. But like I said, and we keep saying, water_RSVP@cobbcounty.org. Towards the end of today or on Monday, we will be sending you a survey link. We would love to hear your feedback about our virtual webinars with our sort of movie magic and graphics. We really appreciate you guys coming here today, and we are so happy to see such a great showing. We love that you guys are getting involved with these lunch and learns. So I hope you guys learned something new today. Thanks, Mike, and thank you to all of you. And like I said, do not hesitate and reach out to us if you have any questions. We hope you have a happy Friday.